Hey everybody, and welcome back to Guerrilla Filmmaker. My name is Owen and I'm the host of this show. This is episode 2. Last episode I talked a bit about equipment and actually getting around to shooting in the wild, but because I didn't realize we were doing more episodes of these, I ended up speaking quite broadly about the topic. So today I'm going to be focusing a little bit more specifically on 2 ideas, in particular ideas / finding those ideas, and then storyboarding those ideas. So because I am a fool, I forgot to bring my book I storyboard in. So instead I just have this prop, which is unrelated, but it's still pretty cool to look at. So I put down a couple notes of how I mainly find inspiration when it comes to anything creative, whether you are a filmmaker, an animator, a writer, whatever you do. So I think one of my biggest tips is I recommend that anybody who routinely remembers their dreams to promote your creativity by writing them down. A lot of times, especially me, a lot of times you'll have dreams that make absolutely no sense, but writing them down gets your brain thinking more so about more abstract ideas and gets you more in the headspace of thinking outside the box. Like I had a dream the other night where I was being chased by wolves, and I don't know how I could tie that into my real life, but I know that because I wrote it down, it'll definitely give me weird ideas for the future. So another one is that although dreams don't always directly provide ideas, they can act as a catalyst for them. So like I don't know why I had a dream about being chased by wolves, but I think it could make for a cool story if it was expanded into something or used as a plot point or a scene in something. But like I said, dreams, you don't have to take them literally for ideas, you can just build off of them. Going hand in hand with that is keeping a journal, or like either on paper or on like your iOS notes app, of random ideas you think of for whatever you do is always beneficial as well. Sorry, my brain just completely stopped. So keeping a journal of things does the same as ideas, in which it kind of promotes concepts. And before moving on, before I forget, I'd like to quickly thank my totally legit sponsor, the iOS Notes app. On my phone, I have like 14 to 15 different notes on there, ranging from like bucket list ideas to board game concepts to skit ideas and literally anything else I want to remember. So if you have an iPhone and you're not using the Notes app, what the hell are you even doing? Android users, you don't have an excuse either, because I'm sure there are plenty of alternatives on the Play Store. Simply put, this is the most convenient way to jot down ideas as a creative. Anyway, obligatory product placement over. 3 last points I want to touch on regarding finding inspiration is long walks through nature, fantastic. That always breaks writer's block for me. And if you can't, like let's say it's raining or there's a straight up tsunami outside, if you have a gym or anywhere with workout equipment, that works well, just because getting the blood flowing is excellent. The other night, I just finished a script for a personal project I've been working on for 2 or 3 months that I hit a huge roadblock at the end, and I was just like sitting in my chair like, oh my God, what do I even do? And I went to the gym, and I walked and I sprinted intermittently on the treadmill for an hour, and it cured my entire, it gave me ideas for my entire story, and I finished it that same night. So just remember, get the blood flowing. Also, what helps a lot is listening to music, because music, at least for me, gives me quite vivid imagery, and I'm sure there's no way I'm the only one in that regard. So as long as it's something that you find rhythmically interesting that promotes creativity, it's probably going to help you if you get stuck writing. Finally, and probably the most important, is just talking about your ideas with people. The more you bounce off your concepts with close friends or family or whoever that thinks similarly, especially, the better. It also just helps with the process overall. I cannot recommend that enough. Moving on, so what if you're one of those people who never has dreams, or maybe you struggle to come up with those ideas, or maybe, God forbid, you have no friends? Well, I can't help you with the last one, but there is another option to help you figure out what you want to shoot. What if I told you there is a way to get ideas without actually getting ideas? Let me phrase it like this. Have you ever heard of a little thing called stealing? No, I'm just kidding. But let me ask you this. You wouldn't download a house, would you? No. In all seriousness, if you truly struggle to come up with ideas on your own, it never hurts to imitate what inspires you. When I was much younger, I used to be really into music production. So one winter, I begged my dad to buy an FL Studio license for me. And come Christmas, that was exactly what he got me. It turns out that music production is really, really hard. And shocker. So although I 100% see myself as a creative type, it's just not something that comes naturally to me like video or photography does. So after some horribly failed songs, I decided to shift gears and try replicating a theme I'm sure everybody knows, and that's the Mortal Kombat theme. It's both a blessing and a curse that this song is now forever lost to the sands of time, but I can attest that this method definitely worked. Of course, it sounded nothing like the actual theme, but the true goal wasn't to perfectly copy it. It was just to get the ball rolling and using a familiar beat and see what it would turn into. That's the thing about imitating art. You can never fully copy another person's work, and if you have any sense of morals, you'll realize that that's a good thing, especially if you make art yourself. You should never look at somebody else's work and think like, yeah, this one looks easy enough. You should always be looking at other people's work instead and asking, like, what elements make this unique? How can I take those and expand and change them? How can I make this mine? The coolest part about this method is that it applies to all types of art as well, including guerrilla filmmaking, or just video making in general for that matter, and that's because it's a state of mind. It's a practice that you adopt and you get better and better at, and I highly recommend trying to imitate what inspires you, because it's almost guaranteed to give you interesting results, regardless of if they're what you want or not. Also, it's free. In fact, all of the methods I mentioned earlier are free, so there's no reason to be uninspired, not in this economy. So by this point, you might be wondering, what do I do with all these incredible ideas I come up with? Well, that's where scripting comes in. You can start with a loose outline, like putting note cards with key plot points down and then just organizing them using a basic template, then slowly fleshing it out and revising until you've got a nicely packaged script, ready to be transformed into one of the greatest pieces of art ever made by man. Or you can just wing it. That works too. I find myself winging all sorts of stuff. Honestly, side note, saying just screw it and completely winging a shoot is sometimes half the fun of guerrilla filmmaking. Of course, because of its very hit or miss nature, the results can be very half-baked, but at the end of the day, you're always going to take some valuable lesson away from it. But because scripting is generally a very straightforward process, there's not very much I can talk about regarding it. So instead, I'm going to move on to storyboarding, which is the natural next step in progression of your pre-production schedule. To summarize my thoughts regarding the art of storyboarding, I've boiled it down to 2 sentences. Storyboarding as an idea is cool. Storyboarding in practice is not cool. Obviously, this is an extremely subjective opinion, but personally, I find it very tedious drawing out all of these aspects of a scene and how they work together. I wish I could just transfer the images in my brain and directly transport them into the minds of my crew members so that they could see it how I see it, but that's just not how it works. So why am I talking about it then? Because it's important. Storyboarding allows you to directly share scenes in your mind with others to help them make your vision come to life. I know I was dogging on it earlier due to its tedious nature, but it can actually be a pretty fun process at times, especially if you're a good artist, which I am not. So to showcase that, here's me drawing up a simple one about a stick figure going to the bank. Hey everybody, and welcome to the video segment of today's episode of Guerrilla Filmmaker. In this one, I'm going to be showing, as I mentioned earlier, off a very simple demonstration of how I would storyboard a pretty small scene. So because I don't actually have a script for this, I'm going to just be using 3 simple aspects. So beginning with point A, we're going to start with where my figure is going to be leaving his apartment, and he has to make it to entering the bank, which is where whatever the next scene would be. And then I just made a very small category for stuff that could happen in between. So in this one, obviously, it would just be a car driving by. Obviously, a lot more could happen in between there, but I want to keep this one short and sweet. So let's get to it. So generally, I start with one simple box, and then I just kind of make another one that's ready to go. And I would keep filling in more, but I don't know how many I'll need. So starting with the simple one, we could do a nice flat shot of maybe there's a downtown street and we have all these buildings behind or right in front of you. That is a small building. We'll say this can be like an alleyway or something. And then we're looking at the entrance doors of this dude's apartment. Could put some freaking street things on there. I forgot what they're called. Put a window. Opening wide shot of this man. And maybe the doors freaking open up. Well, one of them does. Looks kind of dumb, but that door is opening up, and we see a figure step out, and he's our little man. Put a little arrow there to demonstrate that he's walking out, though I think that'd be pretty obvious in the script itself. The next shot could be just to cut right to it and get get the little car driving by in there. We can say that the camera could cut to a different angle, or sorry, not a different angle, but a different shot where maybe he's further down the street now after some walking. Those are horrible. Those are supposed to be street lines. There are more buildings behind him. They would obviously be a lot bigger, but this is for an example. And we'll say he's on the sidewalk walking. You don't really need arrows, but just kind of helps to show the direction he's moving in. So once it gets to this shot, you could say that immediately after he does so, or it enters this scene or whatever, a car drives by, and it can be like, oh my god, and I really gave it no room for detail. Wow. We'll say that's a door. That can be a door, and it can be driving screw it, just have it driving this way, whatever. For a very, very quick example, this could demonstrate just, the one element in between point A and point B would be this car, and obviously you should have maybe 1 or 2 more frames showing where it starts and where it ends, or maybe there's a reason for it. Otherwise, it's just foreground imagery to set the scene more, but like I said a million times, I want to keep this short. So moving on, after the car passes by, my cat has decided to join. Say hi, Vicky. We'll say the car is passed, and now he's approaching his bank. So, I have no idea how to draw a bank. Big old Western bank. Just says bank on top, begging to be robbed. This is so dumb looking. I'm imagining all of this as one panning sequence, or just following him down the street for simplicity's sake, just one shot. But eventually the bank rolls up into view, and he gets nearer to it, and then we can do a nice closing scene where it's like a close-up of the scene of the bank itself. So we got some windows up on the sides that are now in view, and you know what, screw it, I'll just commit and give it some saloon doors. But first we can have our little man, and he's going inside. Those are saloon doors, if you couldn't tell, though I know you could because I'm an expert artist. And well, that's point A, like I said. So leaving the apartment, and he goes down the street, and then sequence of the car driving by, which I'm imagining is just to make it feel more alive in this little world. And then he hits up the bank, and then point B, where he actually enters the bank. Wow, I hope this is entertaining. Oh, my table's misaligned. That's good enough. So yeah, that was my incredible storyboard. I hope you enjoyed it. It wasn't particularly good by any means, but I like to think it's just enough to get the point across to whoever I would theoretically share it with. I think it goes to show that just about anybody can make one regardless of their competency. That's about all I've got for today's episode, so thank you all for watching, and make sure to tune in later for the third and hopefully final episode of Guerrilla Filmmaker. Peace out.
Hi there, and welcome to Game Talks, where we dive into all sorts of gaming-related topics. I'm your host, Brendan, and in today's episode, we'll be covering a topic that's been affecting gaming quite frequently as of late: the battle between indie games and AAA games, and how some AAA titles with millions of dollars pumped into them have been losing to passionate solo developers. But before getting into all of that, we need to define and explain some general terms to the viewers who may not know the difference between an indie developer and a AAA developer. An indie developer is a game developer or a very small group of developers who work on an incredibly small budget for their games. And many times these developers are just as passionate in making games and are simply doing it for fun or as a hobby. Some examples of some indie developers could be Team Cherry, the three-man team behind the hit Hollow Knight, or it could even be a solo developer like Eric Barone, the developer behind the beloved Stardew Valley. A AAA developer is a massive team working on a game, with a massive budget for the game as well, sometimes up to tens of hundreds of millions of dollars. Some examples of these could be Blizzard Entertainment making huge production games like Overwatch, or Bethesda Softworks behind games like Fallout 4 or Starfield. Now that we are all caught up to speed, let's examine strictly through the numbers on how some indie games have beat or have already beaten these AAA Goliaths through a short video. Let's look at a few indie games and see how many copies they have sold and their gross revenue. Stardew Valley is a game we will dive deep into examining this episode, so let's take a look at their sales numbers. As of February 2024, Stardew Valley has sold over 30 million copies in total and has generated around $300 to $450 million in revenue. Terraria is another indie game, which is also one of the highest selling video games of all time. They have sold over 58.7 million copies of the game and have an astounding $507.4 million in gross revenue. Project Zomboid is the last indie game we'll look at, where they have sold 9.6 million copies and has generated over $130 million in gross revenue. Now, let's take a look at a few AAA games and see how their sales figures match up. Cyberpunk 2077 is a AAA game that sold over 25 million copies at the end of 2023 and had generated $752 million in revenue. We also have Call of Duty Vanguard, which sold over 30 million copies. Now, we also have to address a few extra variables as well. Even though games like Cyberpunk 2077 and most likely Vanguard have a much higher gross revenue than these indie games, these games have a much higher budget than indie games. For example, Cyberpunk 2077 cost over $450 million to make, meaning they really only made about $300 million. Compare that to the indie games, where they usually cost maybe $1 million at the higher end at most, or sometimes even nothing, as the person or people making them are doing it for fun on the side. Another thing to address is time. All of these indie games have taken years to get to where they are today. Stardew Valley, Terraria, and Project Zomboid have been released for over 10 years and are continuing to be worked on to this very day. Compare that to Vanguard, which only had a 2-year development time. Indie games simply have a much longer development time compared to AAA games. And so, it's a little difficult to get a true sense of how well indie games and AAA games do from just a sales standpoint alone, due to their differences in budget, development time, and many other factors. So, I want to take a bit more of a subjective viewpoint by analyzing a few indie games and a few AAA games to see what the differences between them are gameplay-wise. Now that we've looked through all the numbers, let's start to take a bit more of a subjective look at some indie games and some AAA games and dissect what indie games have that AAA games lack. Let's take a look at the recently released indie hit Lethal Company. This game is about going to different planets and gathering loot, all while avoiding monsters. The game has no true permanent progression, with players only able to buy upgrades or cosmetics for their spaceship during that specific run. So, why has this game sold over 10 million copies? It's simply because it gets fun right. The game is multiplayer, which allows your friends to jump in and help you along the way. It also has proximity voice chat, which is a feature where when you speak in game, only players nearby you can hear you. If you two go too far apart, then you won't be able to hear each other, which helps to make certain interactions in the game even funnier and can also escalate the horror elements of the game at certain points as well. And through my own experience, a game where you can play with your friends and one that has proximity voice chat makes the experience even better, as you can goof around with a funny voice chat system with your friends. Imagine some scenarios with me that are only possible with proximity chat. Your friend runs down into a dark hallway screaming and then abruptly goes quiet. You're standing on a hill and you can just barely hear your friend as they're being chased down by random monsters. You can probably picture these scenarios pretty well, and they're all only achievable through proximity voice chat and multiplayer. Games are just simply fun when you can play with your friends, and when there are systems in place that allow these fun moments like these to happen. Lethal Company is a simple game at heart. Despite complex monsters and mechanics, it allows for these simply fun moments. And it prioritizes these fun moments with your friends over anything, over microtransactions or mechanics to get you sucked into the game. It simply wants you to have a fun time playing video games with your friends, which is what I think AAA doesn't get. AAA games have to have so much money and so much time invested into them that they just can't be fun. They need to be a worthwhile and safe investment. They need to be filled with microtransactions and other mechanics to keep players playing daily in order to make a return. Or even sometimes they underdevelop the game and release a half-made product to save some money. And by trying so hard to make their money back from their investment, a lot of the time the passion in making video games is lost. Let's examine a AAA game to see what went wrong with it. Starfield was one of Bethesda's most anticipated titles, with it being a new IP for Bethesda in many, many years. It was supposed to be Todd Howard's, the CEO of Bethesda's, dream single-player RPG space game. It was in production for over 8 years and was hoping to host an immersive and exciting interplanetary gameplay and host thousands of unique planets. The whole production costed Bethesda over $400 million to produce and had over 500 developers working on it at a single time. However, after release, it only sold 3 million copies and faded into obscurity much faster than it came. The game released to a huge batch of criticism, with it ranging from boring and lacking content to the massive numbers of bugs and glitches still present in the game to the uninspired planets with similar features with one another. In addition to all of these problems, they later also introduced microtransactions as well. This has led to many negative reviews on the game on Steam, in addition to the massively underperforming number of sales. People don't want a game with boring fetch quest content filled with bugs and microtransactions. Starfield didn't re-innovate anything. They just used similar planet generation to make thousands of unique planets with the same things in a different combination, with poorly animated and unexpressive NPCs. No gamer wants to be unimmersed from the world that they want to be invested in when they see a weird bug or glitch. Starfield didn't truly provide anything unique for gamers to play, which ultimately led to its downfall. If you don't have a simply fun game or a game that re-innovates anything with unique ideas or gameplay, then it will just simply fail, as Starfield did. Let's examine another game and see what they did wrong. But before we examine this game, let's talk about today's sponsor, NordVPN. Do you know what's worse than playing a bad game? Not being able to play games at all. This is where NordVPN steps in. NordVPN is one of the most secure VPN providers out there. They allow you to change your IP address to one from any country in the world. For example, if a game is unavailable in your country, NordVPN allows you to change your IP address to a different one, allowing you to play regardless of where you are. In addition, NordVPN provides the most secure privacy you can get on the internet, warding off hackers and actively working to remove your personal data from dark webs all across the internet. If you're looking for a way to browse the internet safely, then get NordVPN today. Now, let's get back to the episode. One of the more recent games that took the world by storm was Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 is considered by many to be a AA game, which means it has a bit more of a sizable team and budget than an indie game, but it isn't enough to be fully considered a AAA game. However, it is important to note that the game was published by Sony, which plays a very important part later on. It released this past February and immediately had a massive surge in players. It is a multiplayer action game that is all about fighting for control of many different planets across the galaxy and has a huge emphasis on community. In order to actually defend or attack planets, the community has to unite in order to fight for that planet, which helped to bring everyone together as everyone worked towards a common goal. Generally, many praised it for its incredibly fun gameplay and the atmosphere that it immersed gamers with. However, the game also released with many bugs and glitches, and the server size simply could not handle the number of players that wanted to play the game. However, these issues were either being fixed relatively quickly or were being actively worked on, which made the community very happy. It felt like a breath of fresh air for many gamers, including myself. It felt like the passion of an indie game mixed with the proper graphics and a budget of a AAA game. The game allowed you to have epic and funny moments with your friends and simply allowed you to have fun. However, in May, they released an update which would have forced players to create a PlayStation Network account. This was a huge problem as it was not mandatory at the beginning of the game to create a PSN account to play. And you were not able to make a PSN account in over 150 countries. Many players could no longer buy the game due to this requirement, and many were upset due to the sudden change. They thankfully removed this requirement of creating a PSN a few days later. However, the damage was already done. In addition to this, the balancing team behind Helldivers 2 made some incredibly interesting decisions, to say the least, behind certain weapon balancing. They were and are constantly nerfing weapons, making the game even harder than it already is. And many gamers were upset by the fact that the developers were making the already fun weapons in the game weaker and less fun to use. Overall, the game has declined in popularity, but still sits at a relatively decent player count. However, I believe the AAA aspects ruin the fun parts of this game. Sony killed this game by forcing players to create PSN accounts, which was only to increase the number of PSN accounts to their shareholders, and one team from the sizable team of developers working on this game had ruined the fun of the game by making its weapons unfun to use in the first place. The last game we'll examine will be an indie game that I absolutely adore, and that I believe gets a lot of things right. And that indie game is Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley is a relaxing farming simulator game developed by one singular person, Eric Barone. Eric Barone produced all of the music, made all of the sprites, and created all of the gameplay mechanics in the game. He was inspired by other games like Harvest Moon and other games as well, like Minecraft and Animal Crossing as well. And then he took all of these things from all these other games and created his own. Barone started development in 2011 and released the game in 2016 after many hard years of work and learning how to create everything from the ground up. Barone put a lot of love and charm into the game, which is clearly seen from the music to the pixel art stylistic choice. The game is a finely polished mesh of interesting mechanics and features, which gives you the freedom to choose how to interact with the world. For example, if you just want to spend a day in Stardew Valley fishing, then you can. If you want to go around interacting with many of the NPCs in the game, you can do that as well. Barone pays a lot of attention to the community as well, and implements feedback or fun suggestions of features that should be added into the game. The fact that the game is simply fun and relaxing to play, the fact that so much passion and love has been put into the game, and the fact the developer actually listens to the community is all just a recipe for a successful game. Again, the developer doesn't prioritize making money or increasing numbers for investors. They simply just want to make a good and fun game for people to enjoy. Overall, from the few examples that I've picked here, I think it's easy to see the general trend between indie and AAA games. Indie games prioritize passion and fun, while AAA prioritize returning an investment and making a game that everyone can enjoy overall. However, this is not to say that all AAA games are bad and that they aren't fun. Baldur's Gate 3 was a phenomenal AAA title that released this past year, and that sold over 15 million copies, and has claimed a massive amount of rewards for their innovation and ginormous game. I just believe that as of late, there has been many AAA games that have come out that have just been noticeably cash grabby, with glitches and unfun features in the game. Many indie titles have rose to the top due to their creativity and passion poured into them, which used to be the same with AAA. Many classics like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 had an unforgettable campaign with a fun multiplayer. However, it appears as of late these massive studios have been pushed towards a more money-minded approach to their games. All we can hope for is for AAA games to regain their lost passion and ingenuity for making games. However, the future does not look bleak for gaming, as the stage has been set for indie developers and their games to flourish with quality and fun productions. We will just have to wait to see how the future of game development unfolds. This has been yet another episode of Game Talks. I've been your host, Brendan, and I hope you enjoyed today's topic. Tune in next time for our next deep dive into yet another gaming topic.
Okay, let's try that again. My name is Robbie Heaney, and this is the Pylon Pundit. Thank you for watching. In this week's episode, I'm going to talk about some of the details about NFL defenses and how they've been able to kind of slow down NFL offenses finally. Over the past several years, it seems like rule changes have been making it harder and harder for defenses to keep up. So we've been seeing explosions in scoring, yards, and it's made for a really fun product, but for people that like to watch defense, it's just not the same as what it used to be. But over the past year or two, it seems like the defense is finally starting to catch up. They're trying to do new coverages and things to slow down these defenses, but at the core of defenses, the coverages are always the same. You only have a handful of basic coverages that can just look a little bit different. But for those of you that might not be familiar with the coverages, here's a whiteboard session to discuss them in a little more detail.
So the first type of defensive coverage that I'm going to talk about is cover two. That one has been talked about a lot in the media with how much teams have been relying on it the past couple of years. So in cover two, what you want to look for is just how the coverage shell these guys, the defensive backs, are playing. So cover two would be two guys covering half of the field, deep halves. So you have two halves, cover two, and then you have your corners. They could be playing man against a receiver, or they might be playing more of the flats with your linebackers playing the hooked curl zones. So that would be cover two. You just want to see who's dropping back deep. If it's two guys covering half each, cover two, it's not always going to be the two safeties. It could be a corner dropping back, and then maybe you erase this guy playing here, and then these guys would each have their halves. So that is basically cover two. Another really common type of coverage that you'll see is cover three. So like cover two, instead of two guys, it's going to be three covering each a deep third of the field. So that is going to look a little different based on the alignments, but it's usually something like outside corner has a deep third, other outside corner is a deep third, and then one of these two would have the middle third. We'll say it's this guy here. So that would leave then this guy, say, covering the flat there, this safety coming up to cover the flat there. Some variation of that. Of course, everything can change up a little bit, but cover three, like I said, just covering the deep thirds of the field. So one more common type of coverage that you're going to see a lot is cover four, or quarters, where four guys are each going to be covering a deep quarter of the field. So usually it's going to be your two outside corners and your two safeties each covering a deep quarter. This one doesn't have a whole lot more variation like the other ones will, because this guy's usually playing up closer inside to the line of scrimmage, so it would be asking a lot of him to drop all the way back and cover the entire deep quarter of the field there. So it's almost always going to be these kinds of guys. It's not 100% of the time, but more often than not, it's going to be the corners and safeties, and then these guys, again, could be playing man, or they might be playing into the flats. This guy covering kind of in the middle, looking for crossers. So that's a basic cover four look. For the last type of coverage I'm going to talk about today, it's going to be cover one. So that one is a lot different than the other ones, because you're only going to have one guy trying to cover the whole back end of the field. So usually this guy would be playing really far back, so that way he can kind of see the whole play develop in front of him and kind of float to wherever he thinks the help is going to be needed. If this guy's running into streak here, go more this way, and hopefully over here these guys can cover their own guys. So with cover one, you're really going to see a lot of man, especially from your corners. That way he doesn't, hopefully whoever's playing the deep doesn't have to worry about the whole field necessarily, even though that's his job, but he can just see which
decide which area is going to need his help, and then hopefully the other guys are able to lock their man up and won't get beat deep, and it looks bad on him considering that was his responsibility technically. And then one sort of variation off of cover 1 is cover 0, where you don't have anybody playing deep. You just would have everyone playing a man, so however many eligible receivers there are, they're going to be manned up one-on-one with the corners, safeties, linebackers, and then everyone else that doesn't have a man that they're responsible for are just going to be pressuring the quarterback and try and get him to throw the ball really quick, make a bad play, or get the sack. This is not a defense that you see often. It is very situational. You do it to try and throw the offense off, take them by surprise. You don't want to actually run a whole game with this as your kind of base defensive package.
I hope you found that video a little more informative. It's that first coverage I talked about, cover 2, that has offenses facing some difficulties that they haven't in the past. Now, cover 2 isn't a new defensive scheme. It's been around pretty much since they started throwing the ball downfield, but it's just been causing some problems for NFL offenses. There were even some NFL talking heads saying that they should ban the too high safety look. That upset some players because, again, it's been around for as long as they've been playing football. So I don't think that that is the answer to the problem. I think it's nice to see that the defense and offense are seemingly on a bit more of a even playing field again compared to years past. So now moving on, I want to take a second to talk about today's sponsor, and that is PFF, or Pro Football Focus. PFF is a great way to keep track of your favorite players' stats, whether it be college or the NFL. While most sites provide basic stats like yardage, touchdowns, and averages, PFF will give you a more in-depth look. Take a wide receiver, for example. Rather than just seeing how many yards he totaled in a game or over the entire season, you can look into his stats based on his alignment via the slot or outside. Or you can see how a versatile safety plays deep, in the box, or in the slot. They also have their own unique grading system that tracks and grades every player over every single play. So now moving on to our next and final segment of the episode, contenders versus pretenders. It's still early in the season, week 3, but we have 5 teams that are still undefeated so far. In the past, we have had undefeated teams way deep into the season that ended up actually not being legit contenders. The most recent example was the 2020 Pittsburgh Steelers. They started the season 11-0, but finished it 12-4 and lost in the first round of the playoffs. So record, of course, isn't everything, especially this early in the season, but I think it's a good opportunity to look at these teams and kind of judge if we think they are those teams that could be contending for a Super Bowl, or if they just kind of got a lucky couple games these first few weeks. So the first team that I want to talk about is the Kansas City Chiefs. This one's easy. As long as Patrick Mahomes is their quarterback and Andy Reid is their coach, the Chiefs are Super Bowl contenders. There's a very good chance that they're going to win their 3rd straight Super Bowl this year and cement themselves as one of the most dominant dynasties in the history of football. Travis Kelce doesn't look as good as he has in years past, but the offense is firing on all cylinders, and their defense has carried the momentum from last year, and they look like a top 10 unit again as well. So the next team up is the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers' entire MO for the past 5 or so years has been to somehow scrape by a 500 or so season and make the playoffs to just lose in the first round, like my example earlier. I think they may be headed in a similar direction again. Their defense is absolutely elite, but the offense has too many question marks and lack of depth to really consider them a serious contender late in the year. If their defense can maybe turn into one of those all-time historic defenses, then perhaps they have a chance, but that is just such a rare thing to come by that I can't consider them contenders at this point in the year. The next team up is the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings have been the biggest surprise for me personally this year. I thought for sure that they'd be looking at a bit of a rebuild or at least a retooling year, but they've started off hot. 3-0 with 2 really strong wins against the 49ers and Texans these past 2 weeks. Sam Darnold has gone from looking like a bust to a front runner for the MVP. If the season ended today, I think it would be hard not to give him that award. It's hard to gauge if this team is legit because they did start off really hot last year as well, just to kind of fade off as the season went on. But of course, injuries played a large role in that. So I'm going to put this team kind of in the middle. I don't think they're going to be a Super Bowl contender, but I do think that they can make some noise and beat some good teams late in January and make a playoff run. Next, I have the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks have also been a bit of a surprise this year. I didn't expect them to be rebuilding like I did the Vikings, but they're playing at a much higher level than I anticipated. Geno Smith is looking like an absolute all-pro so far. He looks efficient. The team is well coached around him. He has playmakers. The defense with new head coach Mike Macdonald is firing on all cylinders. The only thing here is they haven't played the highest level of competition yet. So I'm going to say that they're contenders, but I do need to see a little bit more to push them into that upper echelon with, say, the Chiefs. And then the last team I have this year so far undefeated are the Bills. A small caveat to that, the Bills still have to play tonight where they play Jacksonville, but they are 2-0, and I do anticipate for them to handle Jacksonville and beat them. So this is going to be going off of that belief. If they lose, I'm wrong. But I do think the Bills are a legit contender. Their team went through a lot of changes this offseason, especially on defense and their wide receiver room. The defense is an almost entirely new unit. They lost an all-pro receiver in Stephon Diggs just to be replaced by a rookie. But so far, they are firing on all cylinders. Josh Allen, just like Patrick Mahomes, is in that category of if he's your quarterback, you have a shot every game. I don't care who you're playing. I don't care what team you're playing against. If he's out there healthy, then you have a chance to win, and that's why I think that they're still a Super Bowl contender. Will they finally beat the Chiefs in the postseason this year? Hard to say. But like I said, I do think that of all the teams out there, they have the best shot to. So that is it for the Contenders and Pretenders segment of today's episode, and that will wrap up the episode. So I hope you enjoyed it and found it informative. I will see you all in 2 weeks.
Alrighty. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Myths and Mysteries. Very quickly, here is an opening video before I start up my show. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Myths and Mysteries. I am thrilled to have you join us for our second episode. Today, we are diving into the chilling legend of Bloody Mary. This haunting tale has been passed down through generations with countless variations and spine-tingling accounts. So we will be diving into some of the real, actual accounts of what has happened, which, in my opinion, are most likely fake. But we will also be diving into the original creation and some of the earliest accounts of Bloody Mary. I'm very happy to have you all join me. And now I will be diving into our sponsor for today, for today's live stream. Alrighty, then I will be opening up with our sponsor of the day, which is Monster Energy. Monster Energy is a quick boost for any time you're feeling tired. It is a great way to get some B vitamins into your system. And honestly, for me, it has helped me with so many projects and work when I'm feeling tired and I haven't gotten any sleep at all. So that's what energy drinks were made for, really. It's either you have sleep or you have energy and caffeine. But with that out of the way, let's get straight into the history of the very real Bloody Mary. Now, the real Bloody Mary refers to Mary I of England, who reigned from 1553 to 1558. She was the daughter of King Henry VII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Mary is often remembered for her attempt to reestablish Roman Catholicism in England after her father's break with the Catholic Church. During her reign, she earned the nickname Bloody Mary due to her persecution of Protestants over 280 religious dissenters, which were executed by burning at the stake, which left a lasting negative impression on her legacy. Despite her efforts, her successor Elizabeth I reestablished Protestantism in England. Sorry about that, guys. Mary's reign was also marked by her marriage of Philip II of Spain, which was unpopular among her subjects and led to political and economic difficulties. Her efforts to restore Catholicism ultimately failed, but her actions left a significant impact on English history. Although there is a very real Bloody Mary, it seems as if she does not have much to do with the actual myth of Bloody Mary. Moving on, the myth of Bloody Mary is a well-known piece of folklore that has captivated the imaginations of many. According to the legend, Bloody Mary is a ghost or spirit who appears in a mirror when her name is chanted multiple times, usually 3 or more, in a darkened room illuminated by a single candle or a very dim light. The ritual typically involves standing in front of a mirror and repeating Bloody Mary a specific number of times. As the chant progresses, those participating may start to feel a sense of unease and fear. The legend varies, but common elements include the appearance of a woman's face in the mirror, sometimes covered in blood, of her emerging from the mirror to scratch harm, or even drag the person into the mirror. The origins of Bloody Mary, or the myth of Bloody Mary, they are pretty murky, but it is believed to be a combination of old folklore and modern urban legends. Some versions of the myth suggest that Bloody Mary was a witch, a murder victim, or even a woman who tragically died, seeking revenge or justice. The story has been perpetuated through word of mouth, books, and even movies, making it a staple of ghost stories. In essence, the Bloody Mary myth plays on human fears of the supernatural and the unknown, transforming a simple mirror into a portal to a chilling encounter. Anyway, that is all I have for this episode of Myths and Mysteries, but stay tuned for next time where I dive into the legend of Mothman.
Hello, my name is Elliot Dolan-Roskam, and welcome back to What the TKD. In this show, we will dive deep into details and history of Taekwondo, my experiences with the martial art, and much more. In today's episode, we will be looking into the Taekwondo school that I'm a part of, my journey through that school so far, as well as demonstrating and explaining how to properly execute a basic middle punch. Firstly, we have to talk about Kim's Taekwondo, the school that I am a part of. Kim's Taekwondo has been around for over 50 years. So, how did it start? In 1973, Grandmaster Young Sam Kim set up the first Taekwondo school in the Green Bay area. Since then, they have trained thousands of students in the Green Bay area since their opening. They currently have over 100 active black belts, 20 head instructors, 27 masters, and over 400 students. Now they offer Taekwondo classes, kids martial arts classes, and women's self-defense classes throughout northeast Wisconsin in Green Bay, Pulaski, Suamico, and De Pere. So dive a little bit more into about the Grandmasters and Masters. We have Grandmaster Young Sam Kim, as well as Master Penny Dugan. So a little bit about Grandmaster Young Sam Kim. He not only established Kim's Taekwondo in 1973, but he is also a very accomplished martial artist. He is an 8th degree black belt in both Taekwondo and Judo. He has instructed Taekwondo and Judo for over 20 years. He has over 60 years of experience in Taekwondo and Judo. He has trained 4 Taekwondo Grand Champions and 1 U.S. Olympic Judo team competitor. And he certifies all of Kim's Taekwondo's belt rank testings. And who is Master Penny Dugan? She is a 7th degree black belt in Taekwondo. She's been training in Taekwondo since 1974 and has been an instructor since 1976. She's a former Midwestern champion in free sparring, forms, and board breaking competitions. She was in the 1979 AAU National Taekwondo Tournament and took 2nd place in full contact free sparring. She's affiliated with 15 different schools across northeast Wisconsin. She provides the direction and leadership for Kim's Taekwondo, doing things like holding classes at Redeemer School in Green Bay, leading self-defense seminars for businesses, schools, and civic organizations, directing 4 belt tests per year, and as well as directing 1 tournament per year, directing 2 training camps per year, organizing team building events, social gatherings, and holds fundraising events to support our community. Now we'll be looking into how a typical class may operate. A typical Taekwondo class includes aerobics, stretching, punching, and kicking drills, as well as balance and focus drills. The class usually begins with aerobic movement to increase the blood flow to the muscles before starting a variety of stretching exercises. After this warm-up, forms are usually practiced. And to recap from last episode what forms are, they are essentially sequences of movements meant to simulate combat against multiple opponents. This is then followed by practicing fighting drills, which consist of a series of hand and foot movement combinations, which then leads to short, light contact free sparring matches. To end a typical class, softer drills are introduced, such as self-defense drills, punching drills, stretching, or even board breaking. Now, even though Taekwondo is a very physical martial art that emphasizes the use of your body, your mind is also a very big part of it. So, how does Kim's Taekwondo employ the use of your mind? Kim's Taekwondo highlights the use of mental focus, discipline, and attitude to make your techniques effective. Without this balance between the body and mind, things like your technique, balance, and focus would be improper. Another major use of the mind in Kim's Taekwondo is learning things like the history of Taekwondo, Korean terminology, and things such as the tenets and oath, which I will go over now. The tenets are courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit. As for the oath, it is, I shall observe the tenets of Taekwondo, I shall respect my instructors and seniors, I shall never misuse Taekwondo, I shall be a champion of freedom and justice, and I shall build a more peaceful world. Now that we've learned all this information about Kim's Taekwondo, you may be wondering, how do I join? If you are interested, please visit kims-tkd.com/classes for details on how to join, class costs, teaching locations, and much more. Again, that is kims-tkd.com/classes. All right, before we get into my journey through Taekwondo, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this show, Combat Corner. All right, I did talk about them briefly last show, but they deserve to be talked about again because of how high quality everything that they make is. From headgear and pads to things like gym equipment and things like punching bags, they make exceptional products every single time. Please go check them out at their Milwaukee, Wisconsin store or visit them at combatcorner.com. All right, to get into my Taekwondo journey, we have to go all the way back to over 8 years ago when I entered my first ever Taekwondo class. Here's a quick video describing this journey from the very beginning. Hello, I'm Elliot, and I have been practicing Taekwondo for 8 years, which is kind of a long time. To understand how I kind of got started with this, we have to go back to early 2016. In these beginning months of that same year, I attended my first ever Taekwondo class at just 10 years old. My parents just wanted me to be doing something, so they just signed me up. I can remember walking into the church where the class was held, and feeling kind of nervous and kind of out of place, although I didn't necessarily hate it. And in that church we held, I believe, a year's worth of at least my classes through Taekwondo. After that first class, though, I kept coming back, and eventually, in June of the same year, I broke my very first board. Of course, my mom was ecstatic, but I also remember feeling very proud of myself, because leading up to that very moment, I had practically zero faith in myself going through that board. After that quite major accomplishment, for me at least, it was time for my first belt promotion test from white to yellow. Roughly every 3 months, Kim's Taekwondo holds a day of a bunch of belt promotion tests for all different belt ranks, minus the occasional black belt degree tests, since those take much longer to prepare for, and therefore don't happen every single time testing happens. However, the preparation and training that I went through up to this point had granted me my yellow belt. Even though I was extremely nervous, I still did it. From here, I tested as often as I could, which was almost every 3 months, and I passed test after test, landing myself finally into the brown belt group. Now, as a brown belt at 13, I only needed to wait 3 months in order to promote to black tip, but I did end up waiting 6 months for this one. However, I'm not sure if this was necessarily beneficial for me, because when I got to the test location on my black tip test day, I kind of broke down. I was, or at least felt, very, very underprepared, and was basically convinced that I was going to fail. This was easily the most unconfident and demotivated I've ever felt before a Taekwondo test. However, when I did pull myself together, and my test began, I only really had a small handful of hiccups, mainly in my forms, which I had to complete 7 of, mind you. I did end up passing, but that came with the realization that I really needed to focus and practice much more for my black belt test. This sparked a fire in me that, even through practice sessions I didn't enjoy, stayed with me for the entire 6 months worth of training needed to get that black belt. And trust me, it was not easy. Come test day in early 2019, I am warming up and feeling oddly confident. Probably the most confident out of every single other Taekwondo test I went through up to that point. I remember being still quite nervous, but I knew that I was ready that time. The test then starts, and I am flowing as confidently as I can through everything. I ended up passing with almost straight A's, and was relieved that the test was over, but also very, very proud of myself. I have now been a black belt for around 5 years now. I'm not planning on testing further for a while yet, but I think I may in the future. I'm just kind of focusing on life right now, as well as helping teach students in my Taekwondo class every Thursday. If there's anything that I want you all to take away from this, anything at all, it would be that every single person's experience with Taekwondo or any martial art in general is